So my dad was a farmer, had a mule by the name of Becky, and he always thought it was funny that in high school I dated a girl named Becky, same name as his mule. But he always used to tell me that getting any work out of that mule, he had to get it in the harness first, and these things are like harnesses for preachers. In order to get any work out of them, you have to get them in the harness first. Welcome tonight. It's good to see everybody. Great to be able to come out tonight and worship our God. Thank you for being here, and appreciate very much the song that Wes just led. Not one we sing in the assembly very much, but a good song with a great sentiment, in exhorting us to humble ourselves and allow God to do the exaltation. It's a great lesson that's taught throughout the Bible, one so hard for us to learn. And as we'll see tonight, the Lord Jesus teaches this lesson over and over and over again. He is forever on this point, and we're going to look at several texts tonight before we get through, Lord willing, that will demonstrate that truth. So important for us to let God do the exalting, for us to be His humble servants, and let Him be concerned with who is elevated or not. But we don't typically, as human beings, do that. And a great example of that problem is found in the Old Testament in the book of 1 Kings. You might remember that David had a few wives. His fifth wife was named Haggith, and she had a son. Her firstborn was named Adonijah. And when David got old, was not too far from death, Adonijah decided that he was going to be king. And in fact, he elevated himself to that position as David sort of lay pretty close to his deathbed, not aware of what was going on. Adonijah had some of the chief men join him in a feast, in essence, to coronate him as the new king. And you have the text in 1 Kings chapter 1 and verse 5, where Adonijah exalted himself, saying, "I will be king." Well, word of this gets back to David, and David basically says, He says, Solomon is going to be king. And so while Adonijah is going on with his little inauguration party, David has Solomon anointed as king. And he is paraded as king in the city, basically, before Adonijah's party ever gets done. And Adonijah and the buddies who were with him realize he's in a really bad situation. Adonijah goes into the tabernacle and grabs hold of the horns of the altar, symbolically, I think, begging for mercy. And Solomon, at least in that moment, gives him mercy, but only after, we read in chapter 1 and verse 53, at sort of near the end of this account, he came and fell down before King Solomon. So you literally have a story of a man exalting himself and actually having to fall down there in front of the true king, who was by this time Solomon. A little while after this, Adonijah is slain for sort of a plot to gain some power in Jerusalem, but that's another story. He winds up humbling himself and being humiliated and ultimately slain. Hasn't there at one time or another been a little Adonijah in each of us? When we presumed to have an elevated position in one organization or another, in one family or another, in the church, in some relationship or another, we raise ourselves up only to be brought low, humiliated, and embarrassed. Someone has said that we literally grow small trying to be great. It happens to many, most, if not all of us. Self-exaltation, Jesus taught, is going to bring you down. It'll bring you down in everyday life. If you look at Luke chapter 14, there's this familiar parable that Jesus told to those who were invited to this meal. He noted how they chose the best places. So he said to them, this is now picking up in Luke 14 and verse 8, "When you're invited by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the best place, lest one more honorable than you be invited by him. And he who invited you and him come and say to you, 'Give place to this man,' and then you begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you're invited, go and sit down in the lowest place, so that when he who invited you comes, he may say to you, "Go, friend, go up higher." Then you will have glory in the presence of those who sat at the table with you. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. I want you to remember that line because Jesus is going to repeat it in other contexts. But this is the first time we encounter it in the lesson tonight. He who humbles himself will be exalted, but the one who exalts himself will be humbled. I went to a gospel meeting one time. This was years and years ago. And walked in, and as is often the case, there were 3 or 4 preachers there. And a couple of them were friends of mine, were sitting on nearly the front row. And I walked up to them before services started, and I said, "Wow, you guys just went ahead and took the chief seats." And the chief seats. And one of the friends who now passed away, my good friend Eddie Bragwell Jr., said, "No, we were sitting in the back, but somebody came in and said, 'Move up higher.'" He knew the story. It's funny how we like those chief seats, though. We like the place of honor. We like to be recognized. We like to be noticed. Satan likes for us to be that way. He really likes it. I'm told that eagles like to eat oysters, but they have a hard time cracking the shell open. So what they do, they grab one in the shell, and they'll fly really high over the rocks, and they'll drop that thing on the rocks and crack it open. The devil does that to us, doesn't he? He takes us really, really high and drops us on the rocks. He likes to see that happen. The cure for self-exaltation is choosing to be humble. The humility, the word humble really means to lower oneself. It's the opposite. Exalt means to lift up, and to humble means to lower oneself. And that's what Jesus says to do in verse 11. And not just lower oneself a little bit, and not just pretend, but genuine. Someone has said that a little humility is actually arrogance. The actual lowering of yourself, as we'll see in a little bit, to serve beneath others, to regard others as better than yourself, is what Jesus is teaching and advocating. There's a problem in the religious world. There has been since before the time of Jesus, and he addressed it multiple times, where you have self-exaltation of the self-righteous. People who just think so much of their own goodness and their own righteousness and their spiritual superiority that they elevate themselves. Jesus addressed the problem among the scribes and Pharisees. I'd like you to go to Matthew chapter 23. We're going to pick up the reading. This is a bit of a lengthy reading. I'm not going to read all that might apply, but pick up in Matthew 23, starting in verse 2. The scribes and Pharisees, Jesus tells the people, sit on Moses' seat. So whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do, but do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do. They said things that were right, they knew things that were right, and because they said and knew things that were right, they thought they were right, and they were superior to others, but they didn't do the things that they themselves taught and advocated. He says, for they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. All their works they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the best places at feasts. We just read where Jesus talked about that problem, right? They love the best places at feasts and the best seats in the synagogues, the greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. These men love to be elevated in the sight of men because of their spiritual superiority. But Jesus goes on to say in verse 8, But you do not be called rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Christ, and you are all brethren. And do not call one another, anyone on earth, your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. Do not be called teachers, for one is your teacher, the Christ. But he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. And whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Second time, different context, that we see Jesus saying those exact words. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against yourself. For you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. And then Jesus repeatedly, in the next several verses, over and over and over again, will pronounce that same condemnation, or start a condemnation with those same words. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. So let's notice a few things about this. We see the problem. These people wanted to be regarded as the spiritual superiors of all others. And the thing about it is it just borders on the embarrassing, because it's so obvious that they're hypocrites. If you read through the things that Jesus describes there, he's describing things that would be sort of blatantly obvious to all of the people that the Pharisees were trying to elevate themselves above. And you can just hear the people, leave the synagogue. You mean he's supposed to be a leader in the synagogue, and he's doing this, this, and this, and not doing that, that, and that? You're kidding me. And this is what happens to us. We become blinded to our own failings and inadequacies and sins and shortcomings, and yet somehow we convince ourselves that we're better than the next guy. We elevate ourselves to that position. And whether you're talking about elevating yourself to that position in a group or in a personal relationship, it's self-exaltation. It would be embarrassing to those who practiced it if they weren't so blind to what they're doing. And I say they, and I mean we, and I mean me. It's obvious to nearly everybody else, except oneself. The word hypocrite, the Greek word, as I've noted quite a bit, is a great word. It's the word hypocrite. So that's your Greek lesson for tonight. But it means literally a play actor. It was, used to describe the actors in the Greek plays that wore the big mask and all that sort of thing. And the thing about play acting is there aren't very many people who are very good at it, actually. Have you noticed that? Have you ever tried to watch a film, a movie or a show where the acting is just really, really horrible, and it's even hard to watch because it's so bad? There aren't really that many believable actors in the world, and there sure aren't that many among the Lord's people. When we're acting, we're not believable. We elevate ourselves, but others see that. But we don't. And that's where the problem is. Multiple times, Jesus will call the scribes and Pharisees blind guides. They didn't see where they were going, but they also didn't see themselves as they were. They're blind guides. It's like this story I heard, fable, I suppose. I don't imagine it's real because it has animals talking. So you have this lion, and he's, king of the beasts, and he wants everybody to know that he's king of the beasts. He just goes around to make sure that everybody knows that, talks to the other animals. He goes to the rhinoceros and he says, okay, who's the king of the beasts? And the rhinoceros says, oh, the lion is the king of the beasts. And he says, the lion roars really big. That's right, I'm the king of the beasts. And the lion goes to the giraffe, okay, who's the king of the beasts? And the giraffe says, oh, mighty lion, you're the king of the beasts. And the lion roars and says, that's right. So the lion goes to the elephant, stands in front of the elephant and says, who is the king of the beasts? And the elephant grabs the lion by the trunk by his trunk, picks him up in the air, whirls him around about 6 or 7 times, and throws him up against a tree, then picks him up again and beats him on the ground about 10 times, then throws him in a lake that's next to that, and then goes in the lake and throws him up on the shore. And the lion, now, half out of his senses and beaten and bruised and bullied, comes to himself a little bit and says, well, you shouldn't have got so mad just because you didn't know the answer, And that's how we can't see it. We can't see it when we elevate ourselves and we're anything but the king of the beasts. What Jesus wants us to know in this text and the people to whom he's speaking is, if you want to be great, if you want to be somebody, you be somebody's servant. That's what he says, isn't it? You be somebody's servant. Again, look at verses 11 and 12. He who is greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. He who humbles himself will be exalted. Over in Matthew chapter 20, Jesus had taught a similar lesson to his own disciples. And this tells us, it's when we think about the scribes and Pharisees, obvious hypocrites, they always had something negative to say about Jesus. They were Jesus' arch enemies, so to speak, as he walked the earth. But it's not like they were the only ones who needed this lesson. Jesus' own disciples needed it on a pretty regular basis. And here's one case in Matthew 20. And look at verse 25. Jesus called them to himself. This is after the mother of James and John wanted them to be elevated. Jesus called them to himself and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. Whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant, and whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. You know why Jesus is the King of Kings? You know why he's the Lord of Lords? Because he did the greatest service to humanity that's ever been done. And that's what it takes to be great. Jesus left heaven and came to this earth and lived as a peasant and died as a criminal to serve the likes of you and me. And he's telling us, if you want to be great, you do that. You serve. You sacrifice yourself for others. It's a marvelous lesson. The greatest must be a servant. The well-known conductor, Leonard Bernstein, one time was asked, what's the most difficult instrument to play? And he said, well, I don't know, but apparently it's second fiddle, because I can't get anybody to play second fiddle. Everybody wants to play first violin. Nobody wants to be second fiddle. But without the second fiddle, you have no harmony, you have no beauty in the music. We need those who will just play second fiddle. Self-exaltation will bring down those who are self-righteous, not only before men, but before God. So let's go back to the Gospel of Luke and notice in chapter 18, in verse 9, he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. Again, self-exaltation. I'm better than everybody else. Nobody else is as good as me. I've decided that. That's the way it is. And that's who he's speaking this parable to. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank you that I am not like other men. The implication is I'm so much better than other men. Not like extortioners, unjust, adulterers, even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. The tax collector, standing afar off, would not so much as raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. You never guess what he's going to say next. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. You think he wants us to learn that lesson? And in this context where one person is elevating himself above not just somebody, but maybe everybody spiritually, he just feels so good about himself. And the idea of doing that before God, God's not going to justify you. In fact, God is going to reject you and what you have to offer Him. In Matthew chapter 7, we learn that at final judgment, a lot of folks are going to be surprised. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, done many wonders in your name? And I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. The people so sure that they were better. And it won't appear that way at judgment. Again, the cure for all of this is a lowering of one's self. In 1 Peter chapter 5, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves. Take that lower position under the mighty hand of God that He may exalt you in due time. Self-exaltation, if I can say that, of the unrighteous is a curse on mankind. But it's a curse with a cure. The psalmist pleaded with God in Psalm 66 and verse 7, do not let the rebellious exalt themselves, those who will disobey God, those who don't care about God's will. Because when they do exalt themselves, bad things tend to happen. Let's go back to the Psalms and look at Psalm 10. And again, let me read several verses here, starting in verse 2 of Psalm 10. The wicked in his pride persecutes the poor. Notice pride, it all starts with pride. The wicked in his pride. He's wicked and he's proud. That's a horrible combination. Here's what it's going to do to humanity. The wicked in his pride persecutes the poor. Let them be caught in the plots which they have devised. For the wicked boasts of his heart's desire. He blesses the greedy, renounces the Lord. The wicked in his proud countenance does not seek God. God is in none of his thoughts. His ways are always prospering. Your judgments are far above, out of his sight. As for all his enemies, he sneers at them. He has said in his heart, I shall not be moved. I shall never be in adversity. His mouth is full of cursing and deceit and oppression. Under his tongue is trouble and iniquity. He sits in the lurking places of the villages. In the secret places he murders the innocent. His eyes are secretly fixed on the helpless. He lies in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He lies in wait to catch the poor. He catches the poor when he draws him into his net. So he crouches. He lies low, that the helpless may fall by his strength. He has said in his heart, God has forgotten. He hides his face. He will never see. See how this person has elevated himself above everyone, including God. And a lot of evil that's in the world comes from people obviously just like this person who has such a high opinion of themselves and such a low opinion of everyone else. They feel they can take what they want, do what they want to whoever, for whatever reason that pleases them. Verse 12, arise, O Lord. O God, lift up your hand. Do not forget the humble. Why do the wicked renounce God? He has said in his heart, you will not require an account. But you have seen, for you observe trouble and grief, to repay it by your hand. The helpless commits himself to you. You are the helper of the fatherless. Break the arm of the wicked and evil man. Seek out his wickedness until you find none. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nations have perished out of his land. Lord, you have heard the desire of the humble. You will prepare their heart. You will cause your ear to hear, to do justice to the fatherless and the oppressed, that the man of the earth may oppress no more. What happens to that man ultimately? Well, he's judged by God, and his eternity is not going to be blessed. He puts himself in a terrible position. You have this self-exaltation resulting in a lot of bad in this world. It's insufferable in society. God will handle that ultimately, but it becomes a curse to mankind. It can ruin a church when you have somebody that's Diotrephes, or like who Paul describes in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 20. Among the Corinthians, there was someone that they put up with who brought them into bondage. He says, he devours you. He takes from you. He exalts himself. Imagine what kind of trouble that was causing in the church at Corinth. The person that has this attitude, as you already saw in Psalm 10, see again in Psalm 45, the problem is that they're trying to displace God. They're trying to take God's place in this world. Psalm 75 and verse 4, I said to the boastful, do not deal boastfully, and to the wicked, do not lift up the horn. Do not lift up your horn on high. Do not speak with a stiff neck. For exaltation comes neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south, but God is the judge. He puts down and exalts another. Let God be the one who exalts. Wicked men have no place, exalting themselves. Our problem in this world, among many, but maybe one of the root problems in our society at large, which we've all noticed, it seems to have become coarser, crueler, more divided in the last several years, more evil, frankly, immoral. People are set on having their own way. People are set on putting others down, canceling others, that they don't agree with. What is that? What's the root of that? Isn't it pride and self-exaltation? Or my way is best. And you have to see it my way because I'm better than you. And you have to do it my way because I'm better than you. Isn't that the real thought that underlies so many of the problems that we have in this world? Everybody knows that they know better than everybody else. What is that? Self-exaltation. And one party in Washington is so sure that they have all the answers and are superior in every way to the other party, and you can put names on the parties or not. Someone said that anything that keeps a politician humble is healthy for democracy. If we can find something that keeps politicians humble, it would be great. I read a story some time back about a newly elected congressman went to Washington, and he was meeting with the senior senator from his state, and they were standing on the banks of the Potomac River, and the senior senator was trying to explain, the culture of Washington, D.C. to this newly elected congressman, and he says, just as he's talking to him, there's this log floated by, and he said, son, Washington's just like that log. And the young man said, well, how so? And he said, well, that log probably has 10,000 grubs and worms and ants and critters on it as it's floating down the river. And every one of them thinks that he's driving the log. And that's not just Washington, though, is it? That's the world that we live in. We all think that we ought to be driving. Why, if I ran this country, it'd be a mess. Let's just be honest. Well, if I was making the medical decision, no. In James chapter 4, James is pretty blunt with people who are Christians, some of whom apparently were not living like it. He says in James chapter 4 and verse 6 about God that He gives more grace. Therefore, he says, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up. Humble yourself, and He will lift you up. That's what we sang, right? It's a good song. I'm talking to people tonight who are some of the humblest people I know. Don't let that go to your head. Because pride is insidious. And the first moment we begin to think of ourselves as I'm more humble than you, then all of a sudden you're elevating yourself, right? You see how clever that is of Satan? You just can't even hardly start to think about that without being tempted to elevate yourself. The Lord wants us to humble ourselves before Him. Let us at all costs avoid self-exaltation. I know I'm talking to people who are humble, but I think they need this lesson. Jesus talked to people who are humble that needed this lesson. I need this lesson. Let's allow God to put us in our rightful place, whatever that may be, both in this life and the life that is to come. In 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 6, the Bible says the Lord kills and the Lord makes alive. He brings down to the grave and up from the dust. The Lord is the one who elevates. The Lord is the one who puts down. Let's help. May God help us to remember that. Tonight, maybe someone recognizes their need to humble themselves before God Almighty and put your life in His hands and allow Him to direct you and lead you and be the master and you be the servant. And if you're ready to make that commitment tonight, we'd ask you to come while we stand and sing.